for cutting ties after my parents demanded I pay my stepsister's rent? I grew up as an only child until I was almost 18. My mom passed away when I was 12, and since then my dad and I supported each other to get by. We were a team, at least that's how I felt. My dad was always affectionate with me, but everything changed when he met Susan. She appeared in our lives when I was 17. At first she seemed nice, one of those people who try hard to be liked, but over time it became clear that her priorities were very different. Susan had 2 children from a previous marriage. Ashley, who was practically my age, and Kevin, a few years younger. Suddenly I went from being the only daughter in a quiet house to having to share my home with 2 people who did not seem to live by the same rules as me. The house where I grew up belonged to my paternal grandparents. It was a classic suburban home with a big backyard and an old oak tree full of memories. My grandparents adored me, and for me that house was always a refuge. When they passed away, everything became confusing. There was talk about the family house and that my dad would take care of everything. I was a minor, and the truth is I didn't understand legal procedures or paperwork. After the wedding, Susan moved in with Ashley and Kevin. They brought in new furniture, boxes, and clutter everywhere. Susan started replacing my grandmother's classic, warm decor with a minimalist style that felt cold to me, as if she were erasing what was there before. Suddenly my house no longer felt like my house. Even so, I tried to keep the peace for my dad's sake. He looked in love, and I wanted to believe that we were going to be a united family. Upon turning 18, the first unpleasant surprise arrived. I remember Susan and my dad sitting me down in the living room one afternoon with tense smiles. They told me that since I was now a legal adult, I had to contribute if I wanted to continue living with them. They basically asked me to pay rent for my own bedroom as if I were a tenant. I froze. I never imagined that my own dad would charge me to live in the house where I grew up. Susan justified it by saying it was to teach me responsibility, and that their financial situation was tight. I looked at my dad, waiting for him to deny everything, but he lowered his gaze and took her side. It hurt me deeply, but I accepted because at that time I had nowhere else to go. I was about to start college and was already working a part-time job. They asked me for $500 a month. For a room in my own family's house, it was a high amount. And Susan said it without a hint of shame, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "It's your fair share," she repeated. The most painful part was that while I handed over that money punctually, my step-siblings didn't pay a single cent. Ashley was studying at a private university that Susan had chosen. My dad paid for her tuition, her meal plan, everything. Plus, they bought her a car when she turned 18. Kevin, the youngest, didn't pay for anything either. On the contrary, they spoiled him with things I didn't even dare to ask for. If Kevin wanted a new video game or money to go out with his friends, my dad found a way to make it happen. I, on the other hand, learned not to ask for anything. Don't even think that because you're the oldest, we're going to support you. Here, everyone pulls their own weight. Susan would tell me if I hinted at any complaint. It was ironic because that philosophy only applied to me. Over the years, I finished college thanks to a combination of scholarships and my work shifts. I would get out of class and go straight to my job. I would arrive home tired, with no desire to talk to anyone. My dad came to my graduation and seemed proud, but Susan didn't even bother to show up. That was the kind of detail that kept making my place in that house painfully clear. I kept paying rent month after month. Sometimes I also contributed to the utility bills or groceries, especially if I saw that my dad was stressed about money. And yes, I started saving what I could. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. My secret goal was to move out as soon as I could. I didn't want to depend on people who didn't value me. Even so, it hurt me to think about leaving my dad. It distressed me that he didn't see how unfair the situation was, or worse, that he did see it and still chose to turn a blind eye. The conflict that broke everything happened last November. In my dad's family, since before Susan arrived, we had a tradition of having a big Thanksgiving dinner. A time for everyone to gather. That year, the dinner was at our house. Susan was excited about organizing it. She invited several of her relatives in addition to my dad's family. The house filled with people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, some I hadn't seen in years. Some of Susan's relatives, whom I barely recognized, also arrived. The house smelled of roasted turkey, stuffing, and pumpkin pie. I helped prepare traditional dishes. We made mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and gravy, but Susan insisted on adding a few of her own dishes that weren't part of our family's tradition. I let it slide. For a moment I thought maybe things could improve. There were even times in the kitchen when Susan seemed calm, and I allowed myself to let my guard down. That was my mistake. After eating, while we were all sitting around the dining room table, Susan cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. I saw my dad tense up. He squeezed her hand. I felt the warning in the air. Susan smiled, but it was a hard smile. Family, we want to take this opportunity, with everyone gathered here, to talk about something important. Some people stopped chatting. An awkward silence fell over the room. As you know, Ashley is part of this family, and we always support each other, Susan continued. Lately, she has been going through a difficult situation. Ashley looked down at her plate. Susan went on. The truth is that Ashley lost her job a couple of months ago, and has fallen behind on her apartment rent. Those present began to murmur. My dad intervened with a soft voice. The landlord gave her an ultimatum. If she doesn't pay what she owes in 2 weeks, she's going to be evicted. Ashley wiped away a tear. It seemed strange to me that they chose to air this out in public. Susan took a deep breath, as if she were making a noble announcement. That's why we want to ask all of you. Well, actually, we want to ask you, Chloe, to help her. Suddenly, I felt all eyes on me. I couldn't breathe. What? I managed to say. What are you talking about? My stepmother looked at me with a kindness that felt completely fake. Yes, Chloe, you're working and living here with us with far fewer expenses than her. We thought you could lend Ashley the money for her past due rent. The silence was heavy. I felt my ears get hot. Are you asking me to pay for Ashley's apartment? I asked in disbelief. Susan frowned at my tone. We're not asking you as an obligation. My dad chimed in quickly. We just thought you could support your sister while she gets another job. I noticed he avoided looking me in the eye. Ashley kept her head down. She didn't say anything directly to me. She just twisted a napkin between her fingers. The others stayed quiet, looking uncomfortable. I took a breath. I understand that Ashley is having a hard time, but I can't take care of that. Susan glared at me. What do you mean you can't, Chloe? We know for a fact that you have savings. You barely spend on anything. I felt a knot in my stomach. How did they know that? The suspicion hit me that they had been snooping through my things, checking my bank statements, calculating. That money is for my emergencies, for my future, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm sorry for Ashley, but I don't think it's fair that you ask me this. My dad ran a hand over his forehead. Honey, please understand. Your sister needs help. We would do the same for you if you needed it. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Really, you would? Dad, when I needed help with college tuition, what happened? You told me there was no money, and I ended up paying for everything with my job and my scholarships. My dad closed his eyes as if it pained him to hear it. I continued because I could no longer stay quiet. Meanwhile, Ashley has been given everything. A car, a private university. She has never been charged a cent for anything. And I've been paying you rent for years, giving up things just to meet your demands. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. I'm sorry, I truly am sorry about her situation, but I have already contributed more than enough. I am not going to pay that rent. Susan slammed her hand on the table. Some glasses vibrated. How inconsiderate you are, Chloe, she said, her eyes glaring. With everything this family has done for you, is this how you respond? Tears welled up in my eyes, but it wasn't sadness. It was pure anger. Family, I said with a broken voice. Susan, since you arrived in this house, you have treated me like a stranger. My stepmother stood up. If we treat you like that, it's because you're ungrateful, she blurted out, not caring who was watching. Always with your little victim act. We have given you everything here. We gave you a roof over your head, we fed you. Right there, something inside me broke. Given me everything? I said, raising my voice. I have paid for every single thing. I have paid you month after month just to live here. I saw one of my aunts open her eyes in surprise. Another aunt, my dad's sister, tried to de-escalate the situation. Susan, please, this is not the way to talk, she said. Not today. Susan didn't even look at her. I took the opportunity to continue. And what about Ashley and Kevin? They're the ones who have been given everything without being asked for anything in return. My dad also stood up, trying to put out the fire. Chloe, lower your voice. It's not a big deal. Excuse us, everyone. It's just that Chloe doesn't understand. That was like a slap in the face. No, Dad, the one who doesn't understand is you. I interrupted him, hurt. I am sick and tired of this injustice. Susan pointed a finger at me, her face red with anger. You know what, Chloe? If you don't want to help us, then don't even consider yourself part of this family. That sentence hit me like a physical blow. My dad said nothing to defend me. He just lowered his head. His silence was worse than any shout. Right there, I understood that he had already chosen his side. I took a deep breath, swallowing my tears. Okay, I said quietly. If that's how it is, I'm leaving. I grabbed my purse and walked out of the dining room with my head held high, even though my cheeks were already wet with tears. Nobody followed me and nobody called out my name. I went up to my bedroom, my heart pounding. My hands were shaking as I pulled out a suitcase and threw clothes in without any order. I packed my laptop, my important documents, and the cash I kept in a small box. I did it quickly, as if stopping for a second would make me break down completely. From downstairs, I could hear the confused murmuring of the guests. Someone asked if everything was okay, and I heard Susan saying in a calm voice, "Please excuse her. Chloe just needs to get some air. She gets emotional." It made me furious. Even then, she was painting me as the dramatic one. I went downstairs with my suitcase. In the entryway, I ran into my dad. His face was distorted with emotion. "Where are you planning to go?" he asked me in a whisper, glancing toward the living room as if worried they would hear him. "Honey, please, let's talk about this." I looked at him with eyes full of tears that I could no longer hide. "I don't know, Dad," I replied. "Just away from here. You let this happen." He made a gesture to hug me. I took a step back. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I told him, my voice trembling. "That you weren't even capable of defending me." My dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. I left without saying another word. I walked a couple of blocks aimlessly. It was already dark, and the November air was cold. The city sounds felt far away like a dull hum. As soon as I turned the corner, I burst into tears. I felt like I had just lost my family, or at least the idea of ever having one. That night, I took refuge at the apartment of Natalie, my best friend since middle school. I called her, and she answered on the first ring. When she heard me crying, she didn't even ask for details. "Tell me where you are," she said. It took Natalie a little while to get to me because of the evening traffic on some of the main roads. When I finally saw her car pull up, I hugged her as if my life depended on it. "I'm so sorry, Chloe," she said indignantly as I got into her car. "They really crossed the line this time. You don't deserve any of this." I stayed on her couch that night, and for the next few days, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Susan's sentence and saw my dad lowering his head in silence. My dad sent me a couple of text messages. One said, "Where are you? Let's talk, please." The other, "Come back home. We can figure this out." I didn't reply. I didn't have the strength. Susan never contacted me. I heard nothing from Ashley or Kevin either, as if I had simply ceased to exist. The following week, I started looking for a place to live. With my savings, I was able to rent a small furnished apartment. It was modest, but it was enough for me. Natalie gave me the contact of an acquaintance of hers who was looking for a tenant, and that helped me move quickly. Between the security deposit, first month's rent, and moving expenses, a good part of what I had saved was gone. But at that moment, the only thing that mattered to me was being able to breathe in peace. I returned to the house only once, accompanied by Natalie, to pick up the rest of my things. I went on a Tuesday morning when I knew no one would be home. Entering that empty house was strange. Everything looked the same, but I no longer belonged there. I packed my clothes, my books, and some photos of my mom and my grandparents that I had kept. I left my keys on the entryway table. I didn't want to ever have a reason to return. A bittersweet phase of my life began. I was sad, disappointed, and tired, but I also felt a sense of relief. In my apartment, no one criticized me, no one charged me for existing, And no one made me compete for affection. I had silence. I had freedom. As the weeks passed, the sadness mixed with determination. I was going to be okay. I had a job, I had friends, and I had my dignity. What they had done to me was not going to define my life. It was during this stage, when everything still hurt, that something shifted. One Sunday, I went to visit one of my dad's aunts, Aunt Carol. She hadn't been at the Thanksgiving dinner, but she found out what happened through the family grapevine and called to tell me she was sorry. I went to see her mostly out of a need to talk to someone in the family who wasn't on Susan's side. We drank coffee in her kitchen. At one point, my aunt looked at me with a serious expression and said something that made my blood run cold. "And you didn't know about the house?" "About what?" I asked. My aunt took a deep breath. "Look, I didn't want to get involved, but that house belonged to your grandparents." "Yes, I know that. And they left things in order. I was there when they discussed the will. Your name was on it." It felt like the sound of the world turned off. "What do you mean my name was on it?" "Your dad took care of the legal filings because you were a minor. But Chloe, your grandparents wanted to protect you. I don't know what arrangements your dad made afterward, but I distinctly remember hearing your name." I left her house with my stomach tied in a knot. The next day, I took time off work and went to the county records office. I didn't go in screaming or making accusations. I went in with the calmness of someone who needs to find out if she's been wrong her whole life, or if she's been deceived. They explained that I needed to locate the probated will and request certified copies if I was a named beneficiary. I made appointments, filled out forms, and provided my driver's license and birth certificate. It wasn't a fast process. It was one of those bureaucratic journeys that requires deep breaths and a lot of patience. For several weeks, I went back and forth between the county courthouse and the property records office. Every step I took forward, my anger grew. When I finally had the certified copies in my hands, my fingers trembled as I read. There it was, in black and white. It wasn't an idea or a rumor. It was a legal document. My grandparents had stipulated that the house would be left to me. Not by word of mouth, but in writing with signatures, seals, and everything. I sat there in my car, unable to move. I understood it all with brutal clarity. My dad knew. Susan must have known too. And yet, they had charged me rent for years in a house that, on paper, was mine. It hurt as if something was being ripped out from inside me. I consulted with a lawyer. He explained that although the will was clear, the property title had never been formally transferred and recorded in my name, a process my dad had failed to complete. He also explained my options. I could try for a family agreement, or I could proceed through the legal system. I just wanted to close this chapter without destroying myself in the process. We followed the formal path. There were appointments, signatures, official notices, and more than one internal debate within myself. When the legal process was finally concluded and the property deed was updated in my name, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. Triumph because justice had been served. Sadness because that justice came with the confirmation of a deep betrayal. With the documents in order, I prepared to confront them. I couldn't imagine any other way. One Saturday afternoon, I showed up at the house. It was weird knocking on the door of the place where I grew up as if I were a visitor. Susan opened it, and her face went pale when she saw me. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" she said with a harsh voice, not inviting me in. Behind her, my dad appeared, frowning and nervous. "Honey, you came," he murmured. "Do you want to come in and talk?" I didn't reply to the greeting. I stepped into the foyer with a firm stride. I had a folder in my hand. "I came for something simple," I said, looking at both of them. "I'm here to take back what's mine." My dad looked at me confused. Susan scoffed. "What are you talking about?" I took out the certified copies of the deed and placed them on the entryway table. "About this," I said. "This house is legally mine." My dad took the papers with trembling hands. The color drained from his face. Susan snatched them from him. "This has to be a mistake," she blurted out with a nervous laugh. "Your dad inherited this house, not you." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Susan. My grandparents decided the house would be for me. It's in the will, and the deed is now officially in my name. You hid it from me, and you charged me rent." My dad slumped into a nearby chair as if the floor had given way beneath him. "I was going to tell you. he stammered, not looking at me. I thought that. He didn't finish the sentence and I didn't help him. Susan raised her voice. You can't just come here with some papers and kick us out of our house. I took out another sheet of paper, this one from my lawyer. A formal notice. They aren't just papers, I told her. It's the law. This is a formal notice to vacate. I am giving you 30 days to leave voluntarily. From the living room, Ashley's voice cried out. We have to leave, she said, emerging with her eyes full of tears. And where are we supposed to go? I saw her face and for a second I felt a pang of pity, but then I remembered the dinner table, the humiliation, and the years of silence when no one defended me. I breathed slowly. That's something you'll have to figure out, I replied. I was already told that I wasn't part of this family. My dad stood up abruptly and approached me with pleading eyes. Honey, don't say that. You'll always be my little girl. Can we fix this, please? For an instant I saw the dad I remembered from my childhood, and a part of me wanted to crumble, but I couldn't go back. Dad, I told him in a soft voice, the time to fix things has already passed. Susan started yelling out of anger. Ungrateful, she screamed. You're going to leave us on the street after everything we did for you? Hurt, yes, but not like before. Her words no longer had power over me. The deadline is on this notice, I repeated calmly. If you don't leave peacefully, this will go through legal proceedings, and it will be worse for everyone. I turned to my dad. His face was wet with tears. It hurt me deeply, but I stood firm. Goodbye, Dad, I said. Take care. I walked out and closed the door behind me. Outside, the sky was a soft orange. The city air was crisp. I stood there for a few seconds just breathing, as if my body was finally understanding that a chapter of my life had ended. In the following weeks, the atmosphere grew tense. Not from direct confrontations because I was no longer there, but from indirect messages and calls from relatives who had been silent when I was hurting. An aunt texted me, telling me to be the bigger person. A cousin told me not to make a scene. No one asked how long I had been paying rent in a house that wasn't theirs. No one asked why they had driven me out. They just wanted me to fix what others had broken. My lawyer communicated with them. He explained that if they resisted, there would be court costs, legal fees, and a process that would be much more unpleasant. Susan was one of those people who acted tough when they felt they had the upper hand, but backed down when they realized they had no legal standing. A month later, just before the deadline, Susan, Ashley, and Kevin moved out of the house. I found out through relatives that they went to stay with Susan's sister, crowded into a small space. My dad decided to go with them. Upon finding out, I felt a wave of sadness, but also a definitive sense of liberation. That was his choice and I had made mine. I kept the house, but the truth is I could no longer look at it the same way. My childhood was there, yes, but so was the lie, the mistreatment, and the memory of the day they told me I wasn't family. Over time I made a decision. I sold the house. I didn't do it overnight. I thought about it, I cried over it, I talked it over with Natalie, but in the end I understood that I deserved a fresh start somewhere else. I sold it for a substantial amount. The most important thing wasn't the number. It was what it represented. With that money I paid off my student loans, bought a nice, quiet apartment in the city, and invested the rest for my future. I didn't become fabulously wealthy, but for the first time in years I became secure. I could breathe without the fear of someone leaving me with nothing. And my family? Since the day I claimed the house, I haven't seen them again. My dad has called me several times. He's left messages saying he misses me and wants to see me. I haven't answered. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because I still don't know who he is in my life after all this. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive him, but right now I need distance to heal. I've heard nothing directly from Susan or my step-siblings. The family grapevine tells me they call me a gold digger, that they say the money went to my head and I forgot where I came from. The truth is I no longer care. I got tired of living with guilt for setting boundaries. After everything I experienced, I understood something simple. Family isn't always about who shares your blood. Family is who respects you, who takes care of you, who doesn't use you as a bank or charge you for existing. Today I am 29 years old and I am finally at peace. I wake up in my own home, decorated my way, without ever feeling like an intruder. I miss the dad I had when I was a little girl, and sometimes his absence still hurts, But I learned to love myself enough not to accept less than I deserve. I don't know what the future holds with them. Perhaps there will never be a reconciliation. But what I do know is this. I am never going back to a table where they ask me to sacrifice myself so that others can stay comfortable. I am no longer going to pay for someone else's lack of responsibility with my peace of mind. And that peace, that freedom, is worth more than any blood tie. Comment. I want to take a moment to share a few thoughts on the profound value of knowing your own worth. Setting boundaries with the people we care about is one of the most difficult choices we can ever make. A true family should always be a sanctuary of mutual respect, instead of a place that demands constant emotional sacrifice. You never have to set yourself on fire just to keep other people warm. Walking away from an unhealthy environment to protect your peace of mind is a beautiful act of courage. Genuine connection requires taking responsibility for our actions and treating one another with simple kindness. It is completely acceptable to step back from any space that makes you feel small or unappreciated. Healing from past hurts takes time and patience. I encourage you to forgive yourself for the times you accepted less than you deserved. I hope you always remember to protect your heart and build a life surrounded by people who truly cherish you. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.